You've spoken a lot over the years since I've known you, Michael, about people who notice things, which
Yes.
inexorably leads to discernment, isn't it? It's the word discernment.
Yes.
So you've mentioned that you've been drawn to people, and indeed your own son is someone who you call a noticer. And
The cameraman, yes.
and you've been drawn to Sol Bellow and
Yeah.
worked alongside the great Charles Eames,
Yes.
both of whom you have remarked are remarkable noticers.
Yes.
How important has this been for you in your career as a crop circle researcher?
I think it's been essential, really. And I mean, I suppose I'm known for geometry, which I feel in many ways, if I'm honest, is a falsehood. I love geometry and I love the way things are in the real world. I think once Karen, bless her, referred to me as a master geometer, which was a title which irked, because I knew it was an enormous overstatement, and many of my colleagues my master's hugely superior, but what I'm good at, what I will happily sit still for, is that I'm good at noticing things and using that which I notice in hopefully a constructive way, which often goes from noticing to geometry to a conclusion. But geometry in itself is part of the toolbox. It isn't that on which you wish to use the tool, so that in a way the crop circles are the raw planks, the raw piece of wood with which you wish to build something. The toolbox is geometry, or the equivalent of the saw and the hammer, with which you put together a shelf or a cupboard or something, which brings some order to the idea. But the fundamental thing, the first thing, is the noticing, I'm a bit of a noticer. Geometer? Bullshit. I'm a noticer. And what I've done for these last years in the crop circles is notice things. And I think this is driven more acutely home to me, like a 6-inch nail in my skull, to go onto the crop circle connector and look at the diagrams there and be appalled again by the poverty of noticing. And if I've done anything over the years, it's try to get people to use their eyes. Look. Thank you very much. That's all I have to say.
Hospitality portals. You've talked about this feature of the crop circles for many years now, in that the normal geometry of a crop circle, what you would expect to see if you drew it on paper, has somehow been expanded in the crop circle, like the circumference has been blown out or expanded like a bubble by a few degrees, to enable people to have safe passage through the formation. To you, Michael, what does this speak of the mind that creates and designs them? And can you also talk to what level of difficulty it raises creating the general design to when you incorporate those kinds of features.
Right. Well, this perception of the hospitality portal or gateway was brought to me in '94 at the Foxfield formation, when I realized that the gateway had two functions. One, it made it very clear that as far as they were concerned, we were welcome. And not only were we welcome, but in a way, our presence was encouraged and celebrated. And number two, in parallel with this, the gateways also implied that we did not have to trample down crop to kill living plants in order for access to the several spaces we had. And this opened up a long-term quest. This gave me a hint of a generosity and hospitality spirit, which I pursued in my lengthy blog called Who Might They Be, which I tried to infer from the character of their design what might be their nature. I don't know how successful or unsuccessful this might have been, but I think that that was the first inkling I had of their nature. I mean, there is this thing that I'm always very impressed with the crop circle makers. If you hire a carpenter at X dollars an hour to come to the house and put up some shelves, you do not expect him to put a beautiful angle on the corner of every shelf that you haven't asked for, but which he's put on as gratuitous craftsmanship. And there are numerous examples in the crop circles of their putting down a form, the details of which are clear, but then very often there are examples dotted around of gratuitous craftsmanship. And this is one of the things which the profoundly limited man-made claimants never notice or think about. I mean, they say, oh, I did this formation, and if you say to them, that's very interesting, but why then did you spend extra time, presumably at night, presumably enacting criminal activities in a farmer's field? Why then did you spend extra time adding gratuitous and meaningless details which could serve only to enhance the formation? This is one of the things that intrigues me. Now, this is the Foxfield formation of '94, which is loosely based on the geometry now well publicized as the Flower of Life. And I went in and I was overwhelmed by a sense of welcome. And I thought, what is this? This is not like other formations I've seen, there is something drawing me here. And I didn't fully understand the geometry at this stage. It was quite big. As you see, it's 4 tramlines wide. But there was something easy and inviting about it. And I didn't quite know what it was. And then I realized there were hospitality portals. That is, there was no point at which one had to bash one's way through standing clumps of wheat. The clumps of wheat which the geometry had generated were separated. They were separated to the extent that they were easy and inviting to walk through. Next slide, please. There is a diagram. Now, again, going back to the horrifying generality of many of the diagrams you will see, that those black spaces diminish to the point demanded by the geometry. Next slide. Now, we all know that geometry, and all crop circle people know that geometry, and they have a kind of mental blank. They think, oh, if the crop circle is based on the flower of life, we just draw it up like that. Now, here's the point about that. If you want to walk from one space to another, there is no gateway, there is no invitation, and worse, you have to trample the wheat down.
And how difficult, when you come to draw, let's say, the flower of life, which many people are familiar with, and then you consider performing the task that we see in the formation, which is to expand the geometry out in all directions to make these hospitality portals, how much more difficult does that make it, and how do you go about doing it on paper?
I have to tell you the truth, it's very difficult indeed.
Can you explain why it's difficult?
You said it was like a bubble. It's not like a bubble. It's not like a bubble. It's more like a balloon. And you have drawn on the balloon, for example, 2 triangles which meet point to point. And you want to draw them apart to leave the gap. Now, if I don't know how practical this will be, but if you had a flat, uninflated balloon and you drew a cross on it, and you then wanted to separate it so the cross became 2 points, say, so you blow the balloon up, and you hope the cross will separate at that point to create the thing. It's very hard to organize geometrically with a pencil and paper. You have to think very hard how to do it, because the flower of life pattern, for example, is constructed that it is desperate to reiterate the crosses and the meetings and the precision of the junctions. And you have to wrestle with that to create a separation where the junctions are. And this is hard. Takes a lot of time to reorganize in your head geometrically. It's not an easy thing to do.
So we're not looking at the normal geometry of a flower of life being drawn in the field and then someone stamping out the crossovers
No.
and just making a line down the middle, because then the geometry of the whole thing would be too narrow.
It would collapse.
I see.
And then, not only that, but the point of that would simply be
A flat end.
a flat end.
So you'd lose the implied point of a triangle and so on.
Yeah, you would. And of course, the beauty of the flower of love is that this curve, normally this curve goes over. Within the crop circle geometry, this curve goes there and stops, and then picks up on another standing wheat component. And this is very hard. I mean, if you've been playing around to modify that radius and that radius to get them to appear continuous, starts to be problematic. Next slide. Now we're going to look in detail at that junction. Next slide. That's the way it is. You could walk through very easily. Next slide. And there, photoshopped, is the way it should have appeared if one abided by the lame-brained geometers who draw crop circles as though they are strict geometry. They're not. And the truth is, converting that diagram of the flower of life to the spaces, to leave the doorways, is very hard. You have to spend a lot of time adjusting it so that it still maintains the spirit of the flower of life while incorporating the generous gateways. Now, this was 94. This is nearly a quarter of a century ago. And we're still, I mean, I don't look at a crop circle connector too often for reasons too obvious to elucidate, although I will speak privately to anybody and tell them exactly why. But I would guarantee you it's still going on. It's still going on, that people are drawing things as a function of their pre-existing idea of what it should be like. And they're not pausing for a moment to stare at the photograph till their forehead bleeds.
Over the years, I've seen you used East Meon as a perfect example of the framing of a formation in the field. And you yourself have paid particular attention over the years, not just to the measurements of the circle and how the geometry lies out, but also how it positions itself in the landscape and the surroundings.
Yes. Next slide. This was a lovely formation in East Meon. This was an absolutely beautiful formation, which, by coincidence, I was there when Karen and Steve were there in East Meon. A lovely, elegant arrangement of fine crescents. Next slide. I just wanted to put this in to show how gracious their sense of landscape is. If you look to the horizon, you'll see a break in the trees, and below that break in the trees was a pathway, and that pathway is somehow lined up with the tram lines which brought you into the formation. What consideration? I mean, it was a pretty elegant formation, but to give it that sense of welcome as well was amazing.
So you showed East Meon as an example with this straight line of taking the existing feature of the tram line and lining that through to a pathway and a gap between the trees. This covers the first point that you've talked about, noticing things,
Yes.
whether or not people will actually notice this, and then of course whether or not people think that that's just happenstance to have happened like that, or whether or not it was in the mind of the creator.
Well, everything is happenstance. Everything is happenstance. And the question with East Meon is that there was a beautiful coincidence waiting for the circle makers, which was that there was a pre-existing pathway into the wood, which we can see on the silhouette of the photograph. The greenery has a cleft where the woodland path goes through. Now, it is an absolute happenstance, an absolute gift that tramline happened to line up with the pathway. And I do not believe that could have been manipulated by the circle makers, but they noticed it. They noticed it. And they made sure that this became the access tramline and the entry tramline for this most gracious of formations. They could, with ease, have positioned it on the next tramline to the left or the next tramline to the right. But they chose this one because, I suspect, they delighted in that happenstance. Now, one comes back to the question of framing, and this is something which has never been explored properly. We have established these circles are beautiful and considered and impeccably made, but they are always beautifully and considerately and impeccably framed. There's an enormous amount of study to be done on the field and the landscape as framing and indeed enhancement of what we might call the painting. Now, I suspect that if you spoke to Mr. Matisse or Mr. Picasso and you said, oh, we don't care about your frame, we're going to stick it up on an angle on this rubbishy wall, they would object to that. They would be very concerned about the nature of the framing and the positioning of the framing and the wall from which the picture was being displayed. And I believe the circle makers have the same artistic pride and this comprehensive vision of making every crop circle as total an event as possible for the visitor, because I think their object in this enormous enterprise is to speak in the best way they can to us. And we take in as much as we can of this as an experience.
So it just expands out the amount of work that's gone into one of these designs. Not only have we got the actual coming up with the idea behind the design, solving the problems associated with creating it with these added hospitality portals and other features. But now we've got consideration of the landscape in which it's going to eventually sit, how that's going to be framed in the landscape, and the impact, and it seems to be designed to have an impact on us when we experience it, both the hospitality portal and the framing.
When we're able to access it.
Coming back to, again, discernment and noticing these things.
Yes, and I believe, I hope, more and more people are becoming more and more capable of taking a wider and more comprehensive view of every experience. Every crop circle offers not only the two-dimensional graphic idea equivalent to the painting, but it also offers, if you go into it, an architectural event space. And then, if you pull away, it offers a third level, which is, where is this? What frames it? Why is it put here in relation to those trees and that fence or that hedge? Why is it precisely there? And we tend to treat much of this with less importance than I imagine it deserves, because I believe that all these things have been taken absolutely seriously at the point at which they were created, at the point of inception. Apart from everything else. Next slide, please. This is the fractal square, known as the Thistle King's Castle, because, next slide, the highest spot in the field housed a tall thistle, which was higher than the crop. And go back one, could you? And one of these large circles, I don't know which it was positioned directly and accurately to a centimetre over that thistle. Now, there is no alternative to that statement, in that the thistle was fully grown on the morning the crop circle was discovered. How could this be? This massive square formation had to be positioned exactly, next slide, so that you can see how the circle is swirled around its stem. What an astonishment!
I think you may have made a mistake in your lecture, because you said it was one of the bigger circles that surrounded the outside that contained the thistle.
And it was in fact one of the smaller ones.
It was in fact one of the small ones.
Yes.
Now, it seems that you're suggesting that when they picked that location to put that formation down, that they knew of the existence of this thistle and decided to build the formation around the whole thing, because if they'd have gone in reverse, the chances of the thistle being in the centre of one of these little circles is unlikely.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
I think the formation was conceived and designed elsewhere, in the equivalent of a mind or the equivalent of a computer, but it was given its form and its existence. And they thought, oh, we'll do it in this area, and they looked at this area. And I think they saw this thistle very much as part of the framing. And they said, well, we've got this huge square element, and oh, there's a thistle. What do we do with that? And they said, well, we celebrate the thistle by giving it its own micro framing. So we're going to position this elaborate formation with many dozens of circles so that we give this noble thistle its own circular frame. So I imagine at some point they said to each other, left a bit, forward, now. I pressed the button and it came down. But that image of this 3 or 4 foot thistle, precisely, immaculately in the center of a swirl of one of the circles is breathtaking. I mean, that in one shot makes 1,000 statements about the crop circle phenomenon, about the care that has been exercised here. I mean, for God's sake, the formation was enough. It was brilliant. It surpassed my wildest expectations. It's a wonderful exposition of the fractal principle, and beautiful. But then to position it so immaculately over the pre-existing thistle is beyond anybody's expectations. Next slide. Now here's another one, the Stonehenge ribbons. And what I want you to look at, the way each one of these ribbons, like a graceful extended arm and hand on a ballet dancer, is just touching a tramline or a barrow or curving by something else. I mean, it's positioned in the landscape with such precision and elegance. It's breathtaking. And now, if you look, every one of these ribbons, I mean, is made, as you see, essentially from curved arcs, except at the end of 6 of the ribbons where they're cut, like a scissors cut. And that scissors cut is 58 feet long. Now, here is the astonishment. There is only one arc of curvature in the whole formation. And that arc of curvature is of a radius of 58 feet. It's made up of a series of 58-foot radius arcs. And a lot of people look in the middle and say, oh, but that's a smaller circle. It's not a circle. It's a junction of the inner point of 6 of these 58 feet radius arcs. Come on, man-made?
If it was a piece of plumbing and a man who'd been a plumber for 50 years looked at the pipe work and said, I've spent 50 years of my life putting pipes together and making connections, and I've never in my life seen someone who's put pipes together in this way before, he would probably, as a plumber, be at pains to try and tell people how incredible this is and how he's uniquely qualified to notice because he's spent his life plumbing. That's what we're talking about here, Michael, isn't it?
Yeah, but they can switch if he was a sensible human being, he would say to himself, realistically, human beings are not going to notice because they don't. And realistically, I can tell them 100 times and it won't make any difference. So I simply have to repeat myself and repeat myself and repeat myself and smile.
Because ultimately what you're saying is that these seemingly inconsequential details that people don't notice, such as the framing and the hospitality portals, actually add to the evidence that you would put forward to suggest that this can't be a man-made enterprise.
There's no way, there's no way. I mean, the idea of it being a man-made enterprise is as realistic as the tooth fairy.
Yeah, but these points that you're taking the time to present as to people who don't notice these things, you're making these points so that it substantiates that case, is it not?
No, I suppose I mean the case for me is as stupid as arguing about Santa Claus. I mean,
but you're making it. You're going out there and making the case.
No, I'm making the case not that the crop circles are real, because I feel that the reality of the crop circles is a waste of time to discuss now, for me. I mean, I can't trivialize my life further by giving this time. What I'm concerned about now more is the generosity of spirit and the creativity of the culture which gives this to us. And he goes, and people say, oh, late crop, oh, it's a crop circle, eh? What time's lunch? You know, and it just, it pains me. It pains me, really. Okay, next slide. Now, here is an anomaly. This is very interesting. And this was put down in a way to teach us. This astonishing formation came down, very beautiful and unique. And it had in the center an impenetrable space, which we rarely get in a circumstance like this. Historically, normally it is penetrated by a tram line to give you access. But this central flattened space was surrounded by a wall of about 12 foot thick, or just over just under 4 meters for those who don't understand feet and inches. And this formation uniquely was saying to us, this central space is not for you. We've given you here a beautiful, elegant formation, but the central space is magic and sacred. And this occasionally happens, but this was exemplary in the power of the containment of this quiet little protected space by a strong wall of standing wheat. Now, here's what happened. A Dutch citizen, whose name I do not know, and who I hope never to meet, said, I could get in there without damaging it, and he went in, and of course he made the gateway which allowed the world to enter. And so within hours, the sacredness of an untouched space which we'd been offered was polluted by vanity and greed. This is a lesson to us. This tells us why we are in exile from the Galactic Federation, who will not come with us because of our lack of respect for life. And in trampling down that wall of wheat, this person demonstrated very powerfully how undeserving we still are for contact and membership. But it'll be all right.
Do you think the circle makers knew that this would happen and that this would bring this topic up for debate about the human involvement around the formations?
Yes, yes, I do. I think this formation was put down as a tester, and it was remarkable in several respects. The first one, which we've already referred to, is that there were 4 beautifully made and absolutely unique curved, elegant arms, which we never had before or since. This was a style of design which was unique. And what did those 4 arms join at but this imperforate, celebrated space? And I think this was given to us as a test. Look how beautiful this formation is, and look at its central heart, and the central heart is screaming at you. 12-foot barrier. Do not break it. It was a test, and it was a test which I fear they knew we would fail, and quickly. And boy, did we fail it. Next slide. This is a crucially important formation, of which Gary spoke yesterday. Now, let's, for a start, the crucial thing, as always, is the center. I would challenge anybody to draw a circle on a piece of paper without sticking the needle of the compass in the paper first to establish the center. You can't draw a circle without establishing the center. And likewise, I don't know how they make these discs, and in this formation there are probably 6 or 8 discs relying on the center, and the center is marked by 3 elegant large leaves which are undisturbed. How did they do it? But more importantly, there are around the perimeter 33 small rectangles. And you can see them, they're right at the edge. And it is a formation of 5 linear tram lines. Now, if I set you, or a mathematician, or a geometer, the task of driving 5 tram lines across a circle, which was divided into 33, in a way that you could guarantee that the relationship between the tram line and the 2 points of crossing was somehow significant. You would say impossible. 33 and 5, it ain't gonna work. Next slide, please. That's the Immaculate Center with its first circle. Next slide. Now, these are the points at which the 5 tram lines cross the outer circle. And I'm going to show you the relationships that are made with those rectangles. Next slide. I've dotted the rectangles with red so that you can see. That's number 1. Number 2. Next slide. Number 3. Number 4. Next. And that's it. Now, it's easy when you see it done, but who worked it out? The tram lines existed before. The tram lines have been there for seasons. So you make up this huge confection, this huge idea in your head, and you organize it so that when you lay it, it synchronizes, bing, like a well-made Swiss watch. The bits fit together with perfection. I'm just dazzled by it.
Where do you go with this, Michael? Where do you go with this? You've now presented me with examples that go back to 1994, all the way through now to 2016, where you're showing a consistency of the mind behind the designs, placing it in a way that has respect for the existing features in the landscape.
The Anstey question is a real conundrum, because the idea of taking the external ring and dividing it precisely into 33, which is a hard operation to start with, and then overlaying that 33 component ring over the pre-existing farming pattern of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tram lines, so that the conjunction of the ring and its components with the 5 tram lines was in every case significant. Now, by definition, the tram line cut across the ring in every case in 2 positions, and in every one of those 10 intersections, the rectangle, one of the 33 rectangles, maintained a particular relationship to the tram line in question. In no case did the tram lines go between 2 of the 33 rectangles. It always went either over them or against them. Now, I wouldn't know how to start to do that, let alone pull it off meticulously, consistently through the whole event. So as a piece of engineering, of geometry, of pattern making, it's beyond my imagining. And I was no doubt about the fact that somebody could do that, but I don't know who. I couldn't do it. And of course, the Anstey formation raises the killer question, the absolute litmus test of the center of the circle, which nobody deals with. If you want to draw a circle accurately, you need a compass, and a compass has a center point, and if you do not place the center, you can't draw a circle. Now, Anstey required a center point, which in the case of formation was immaculately dressed with 3 leaves, which were totally impeccable, totally undamaged, and that center required, I think there were 9 concentric circles. I mean, who cares if there were 9 or 4 or 3,000? You need a center. And the undamaged and perfect nature of those 3 leaves proves that the center was not used. Now, this is a recurrent problem, which again goes, we don't talk about that. Oh yeah, the center. But I mean, for example, in the bubbles formation of this year, it had 18 circles. They were small, relatively small, but they were all immaculate. Standing crop, wheat crop, beautiful, perfect circle of wheat crop, undamaged center. How do you do it? Oh, I know a man who can, tell me his name. They run away.
And once again, we've got the flower of life design in the centre that's been expanded in the way we talked about to create the hospitality portals. It's not the standard geometry of the flower of life.
No.
So all in all, Michael, it's these subtle, small points that actually become the bigger points.
Yeah.
And it's these bigger points that most people don't notice, either because they're not trained to, or because they don't want to look at them, or when they do look at them, it creates them an uncomfortable position because they can't find an explanation.
Right.
All in all, it's these things which have accumulated over the years to become prominent in your mind as considerations that are worthy.
I mean, they demonstrate to me that underneath this phenomenon, behind this phenomenon, is a breathtaking, unimaginably evolved intelligence which has chosen this moment, or these moments, to open a conversation with us. A conversation so momentous it's beyond our wildest imaginings. A conversation which I am convinced marks a fundamental shift in Earth culture, human culture, so big that we will look back on it and realize what fools we have been. Fools.